Welcome back to the Impact Storytelling Podcast. I'm your host, Sabine M, and today I'm conversing with filmmaker and cinematographer Ben Albert. Ben is currently based out of Milwaukee with a passion for creating compelling visuals genuine to the story he tells. He works on a wide array of non-fiction commercial and creative projects with a focus on our human relationship to the natural world. In 2022, he was selected as a Jackson World Summit Fellow, and he is currently finishing his first feature film, an invitation to Wonder Waubesa Wetlands. Welcome, Ben. I'm really happy to be filming this episode with you and sharing your experience and work with the audience. Before we start talking about your work, what inspired you to start a career in filmmaking?
Yeah, thank you for having me on your podcast. When I think about, what inspired me to start a career in filmmaking, I think to me it boils down to that I really just enjoy the process of making videos, making films. I didn't grow up like watching tons of movies, but I did have an older brother who actually was into video when we were younger, and I borrowed his camera. It was like a Canon T3i, like a really old, at the time it was an okay camera, but now it's a very old camera, and a GoPro, I think. And I actually went to like the local ski hill near where I grew up and just filmed my friends skiing and put together these videos of just like very silly like edits of my friends skiing, and also just random people I found at the ski resort. And that actually taught me a lot of skills I would think I was maybe 13 years old. And so from a pretty young age, it taught me, skills of focusing and exposure, and then also with editing as well, and like editing to music and rhythm. And I think that, I just kind of just thought it was so cool that you could capture this moment, like a moment, basically forever. And from there in high school, my friends and I had this group of friends that were also passionate about film. So we would make these kind of silly short films, and it would be, like whether it was like horror films or like really like dramatic stuff, like running down the school hallways, things that I wouldn't want to show anyone now. But that was also just a great learning experience. And we did this festival called the 48-Hour Film Festival. And we've been doing that for the past actually like 8 years now. And that's where you have only 48 hours to write, shoot, and edit a film. And it's a short, like 4 to 7 minute film. But that was an amazing kind of workshop in a way of collaborating with a team and storytelling in this very short time frame. And I think also that taught me a lot. So I think for me, it was just like the love of, the process of filmmaking that I found really fun. And I mentioned my brother earlier. My brother is still working in the film industry today, and he kind of showed me in a way that it is possible to make a career out of this and make a career out of doing something that you love. So that just made me realize maybe I could actually do this, for the rest of my life, and do this as, not just for fun, but also for a job.
That's great. That's great also that you have a role model in your family where you can see that it is possible. And also amazing that you started so young. That's really cool. When you started filmmaking as a child already, did you then decide that you also want to study it and make a career out of it?
Yeah, so as I said, in high school, I think I realized in high school that this is something I could do as a job. Mm-hmm. And to me, the next logical step was going to film school, because I figured, if I wanted to do this as a career, that's what would propel me furthest. And, I would be in an environment with all these like-minded people and be working collaboratively. So I ended up, after high school, applying to University of Wisconsin Milwaukee and to the film program there, and I went to the program in the fall of 2018, and there's a lot of things I could say about like film school, but for me it I think I didn't do enough research. I didn't give enough thought as to what I actually wanted to get out of school, and also what I wanted to focus on in my filmmaking career. But when I went to film school, it was very narrative focused, very kind of which makes sense looking back on it, but trying to propel you to do more like traditional, like working on traditional narrative films. And also it was interesting because I had come into this with more of the technical, like some technical background in filming and editing, and most people I met at school were almost the opposite, where they had watched movies their entire lives growing up, and they knew all the top directors and what's happening in Hollywood, all this stuff, but hadn't ever really created something. So there was almost a bit of a disconnect, and I think also I realized in school, it helped me realize, and this is maybe the good thing about me going to school. I wish it wouldn't have taken this to help me make this realization, but it kind of informed to me what I actually was passionate about, what I wanted to do as a career in filmmaking. And I realized it was definitely not traditional Hollywood films. And at the time, I grew up on a farm, actually, in Southwest Wisconsin, and it was this beautiful area, just like immersed in nature. And we had it was a small 60-acre farm, but it was enough where you could get outside and spend the whole day exploring. And we had woods areas and prairies, and it was a really beautiful setting to grow up. So that, to me, inspired a love for the natural world, and I spent a lot of time as a kid just exploring that. And I think I kind of forgot about that a little bit as in high school and then college. But in film school, I realized maybe, I could actually have a career doing something, more environmentally focused and something in the outdoors. And I said I didn't watch a lot of movies, but I did watch all of the BBC David Attenborough shows, as I'm sure a lot of us have. And I remember it was freshman year of college, and I had just watched Our Planet on Netflix. And I was just so inspired by that show. And I saw in the credits, the list of cinematographers. And I realized that could be a career, working as a wildlife cinematographer. So that sounded to me at the time like the best job in the world. And I actually reached out to 5 of these cinematographers in the credits.
Oh, cool.
Just over email.
Yeah.
So I just sent them, just a email out of nowhere, and basically just saying I'm in school right now. I, would love to eventually work in wildlife filmmaking of some sort. And do you have any advice? And to my surprise, actually 5 of them got back to me. All 5 of them got back to me. Yeah, with just, some tips they have. And, it's hard for them to give advice to this 19-year-old kid who doesn't have any experience in the industry. But they tried their best. And the 3 big takeaways from that were, first one is that you definitely do not need a film school degree. Mm-hmm. In fact, a lot of them a few of them didn't have any higher education at all. And then the others said that a degree in something more scientific or biology, zoology, where you're, get that basic understanding of the natural world and how it works is very helpful for that career. And trying to remember what the other two takeaways were. The other one was you have to find a way to get connected with people doing the work that you eventually want to do. And they specifically mentioned some of the bigger festivals to attend, and specifically Jackson Wild, which maybe we can talk about later. Mm-hmm. And they were basically like, you have to get to one of these festivals. You can volunteer. It's a great opportunity to network and meet people doing actually what you want to do. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing in this email was, you have to just get out and start shooting and find a story that's like close to you, that's close to home, that's accessible, that you're the right person to tell, and just focus on that. So it took me a whole nother year of film school, but I kind of, I finally, like in the spring of 2020, I realized like film school wasn't working. It wasn't the right decision because I wanted to really work in the outdoor space. And I think their advice really did stick with me. And I made the decision, like I would finish my spring semester at school, and then I wouldn't go back in the fall, but I was going to do everything in my power to make a career, working in, my goal was to be a cinematographer, but working in some way in like the environmental, natural history space. And I kind of just made that decision, and it was scary because leaving school, you have a lot of pressure from family members and just people, wanting you to stay in that path. But I just, in my mind, there's no other choice. It was just what I had to do. And I would kind of do everything in my ability to make it happen. So I don't know if that answers your question. That was a long, it was a long.
Yeah, I think you definitely found a really great story very close to you, and you were working on it for the past couple of years on your feature documentary, An Invitation to Wonder Waubesa Wetlands. I hope I said that right. Where you not only stood behind the camera, but also in front. Can you tell us a bit more about what the film is about and what inspired you to create it? When you went to the wetlands where your grandpa lives to explore, did you already know you wanted to create a film about it?
It was really inspired by my grandparents. My grandparents live in Madison, Wisconsin, and basically right out their back door is this wetland ecosystem called Waubesa Wetlands. And my grandfather has spent basically the past 50 years of his life studying and exploring this ecosystem out their back door. And he taught wetland ecology classes at the University of Madison, taking students into the wetland, teaching them firsthand. So the film, captures kind of my grandfather's love and passion for this place. But I think at its core, it's about human connection to this wild place, both through my grandfather, his perspective, and also through my own perspective and discovery of this wetland. And actually, it's kind of like a rediscovery in a way, because as a kid, I used to actually come to the wetland area all the time, almost every week. My mom would drop my siblings and I off at my grandparents' house, and my grandma would take us out to one of the creeks leading off of the wetland, and we would bring like these little like dip nets and basically fish for these tiny organisms and just see what we could like discover. And so it's kind of funny, going full circle and coming back when I'm, 20 years old and kind of rediscovering this place that did mean a lot to me growing up. And I think in a way, kind of rediscovering my own like passion and love for the natural world and nature. So I think that was definitely part of the inspiration for the film, was, already having that history with this place as a kid, and also then my whole life seeing how passionate my grandpa is about it, how fascinated he is about this ecosystem.
Yeah. I think it was definitely really interesting to also see that you have been there basically your whole life in between, always, to see you as a little kid and then as a young adult again, and to explore. And it seemed like, yeah, it did seem like you weren't there for a little while, and then you explored it with new eyes and in a new way. And I thought that was super interesting. And yeah, your grandpa, all the great things he did there, and how he taught, it is really interesting. And I'm always happy to watch it. How did your pre-production process look like as you started to make this film on your own during COVID?
Good question. So as I mentioned, well, I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but this was my first long form documentary. Up until this point, I've done only short films. Maybe the longest project I worked on was 10 minutes. So pre-production was almost non-existent in some ways. I think there's a few, and that's not something I would recommend. I think it works. It in some ways lent itself to this project, but usually, yeah, you want to spend a lot of time in pre-production and plan out the story and plan out, who your subjects are and interview questions, everything. For me, this, as I said, I just dropped out of school and I was, trying to figure out the next step. And I really just wanted to get out and start shooting something. And also I don't have a scientific background. I don't know. I wasn't like, even though I had spent time in the wetland, I'm no like wetland specialist, and I felt like I first had to just go out and experience this place, firsthand, and also learn from my grandpa. And that was kind of the only, like, the best way to then come up with what the story might be. Like, I felt like I had to first experience it, see what's there, and just spend a lot of time there and see what evolves. But we had some like objectives with the film. Yeah. My grandpa like really wanted to make, maybe like a 20-minute documentary that we could pitch to PBS Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. That would be very focused on the ecology and, the wildlife, and maybe following a specific species. And mm-hmm. of course, me having just watched watching like Our Planet and those series, I was super naive and thought like I could, find that species and capture incredible animal behavior and have that be the guiding line through the story. So that was like the initial kind of idea. Okay. But yeah, and there's a lot more I could say, I guess. But it evolved. It evolved a lot from there. I think primarily, this is getting a little bit more into production. Mm-hmm. But since I didn't have that strong pre-production plan, I went out and I was, I filmed, I don't know if we'll talk about this later, but I filmed for about 9 months total, or 6 months total, mm-hmm. in the wetland. And 3 months at the start were very consistent, almost going out every day. And I was, I would go out in the morning and I would be looking for like basically whatever piqued my interest. And I had talked to my grandpa to see like, maybe what wildlife species to focus on. So yeah. I would go out like with the intention, I'm going to find sandhill cranes, focus on sandhill cranes, find, their like nesting areas, film like their chick being born, and that would be the story. And then maybe I would capture one shot of a sandhill crane, and then like something else would, like a dragonfly would distract me, and then I would film dragonflies for the rest of that day. And it was this constant, like, just following these little tangents that I would find. And, I was hoping to find something specific to focus on, but it also like allowed me to capture a portrait of the whole ecosystem, and also kind of document my process of doing that and my own discovery of this place. So I think if I had a strong pre-production plan, it would be a very, very different film.
And when did you then decide that you're gonna put yourself into the film, and the viewers are kind of following your story and your exploration through the wetlands? Did you start filming yourself at first just for you, or did you already know then that maybe you're gonna put yourself in the film?
Yeah, that decision didn't come until halfway through production. Maybe, I don't think I decided I'd be a character in the film until August or September. And I started filming in like late May, early June. So that decision didn't come until a lot later on. But as you said, like I was filming myself earlier, throughout the whole production. I think because I thought it was just a moment of my life that I wanted to document in some ways. I thought it would just be fun to like have this footage of me struggling to explore this ecosystem, and just learning from it. But there wasn't an intention to include that footage in the final video until much later. But that allowed it, I think, in a way that I was a lot more like candid and genuine when I was in front of the camera, because I thought I was just filming it for myself.
Yeah.
So.
I remember when we met, I think you were asking if me and the other Jackson Wild Summit fellows like that you are in the film, or if we would prefer it without you. And I think we all said it is really cool that you are in the film and that we can explore with you. So I think that was definitely a really good decision. And you also had the footage of you as a child in there. Where did you get that from? Did your parents film you during your explorations, or your grandma? Where did that come from?
Initially was hoping to make, this film with amazing animal behavior, capturing this ecosystem, following, a wildlife character basically. But talking to my grandfather, learning from him, I realized that, on a much deeper level, this film, the most meaningful part of this film would be how my grandfather views this place, and his perspective and his love of the wetland, and how he personally has learned from it. And that made me start to think about, the ways that throughout this whole process, I was also learning from this place. And even, and it's a very like intergenerational story of learning from this wild place. And going into your question, like as, even as a kid, that's kind of where that connection with this landscape, with this place started. And the footage that you see in the film of me and my sister, I think it is, with my grandma out fishing or using the dip nets in the wetland and discovering these critters and these organisms, was a segment that was featured in this other film about my grandpa and more of like his life as a scientist. Cool. But he told the production crew that, his grandkids come out there every Friday. So they were like, that's a super, that'd be a super super interesting component and of the story, and we should capture that. So that was filmed by this company called Compass Light Productions. They're based out of Maine, and they have they've done a lot of like outdoor films and documentaries. And there's a kind of a tangent story, if you want, about I actually did an internship with Compass Light Productions.
I think I've read that. Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of interesting. I reached out to the director of Compass Light. His name is David Conover, just asking if I could have permission to use this footage in the film. And he was, super excited. He loved working with my grandpa, so he was super excited to give me access to this footage.
That's great.
And I was actually, I was out in Maine visiting my sister, because my sister worked in Maine at the time. And Compass Light Productions, their office was located like a few hours south of me. So I reached out to David Conover and just asked if I could maybe, come see their space and just meet with him in person. And we set up a meeting, and I think he was, again, really excited about what I was doing. And he offered me an internship working at Compass Light Productions.
Nice.
So I ended up living in Maine doing this internship for a good 3 months, and doing assistant editing with them. And it was a great learning experience, and also just connecting with other people working in this space. So it's interesting how working on a project like this can lead you to all these other opportunities and experiences that you wouldn't have otherwise.
So nice that the company gave you permission to use the film material, and really lucky for you that a high-end production or a good production was made, and that you had all this footage, because I think that is really something really interesting in the film as well, and it's lovely to see you as a kid exploring there.
Yeah, it was amazing, and they actually gave me access to all the footage they shot of, when they came to visit my grandpa, when they came to film at the wetland and film my grandpa. So I had access to this pretty big library, and I used, you'll see throughout the film, there's actually a few spots where I insert this footage, it was shot in 2005, and make it look like it was footage I filmed, because I just needed this specific shot. And it was just extremely helpful, but also just to give you that sense of time and like the timeline of, just my grandfather, as I said, has been my grandparents have lived here for 50 years and have been studying and exploring this place. So it's amazing to have footage that kind of illustrates that scale of time and connection to the wetland.
Yeah, that is really great. And I think walking through the wetlands or moving through the wetlands is not that easy, as I also saw in the film. What were the struggles shooting in this environment?
Yeah, there are definitely quite a few struggles filming in a wetland. I filmed a good portion of the footage from a canoe. So the canoe provided a very stable not stable platform, a very safe platform away from, the water and all of, wetlands are, as the name suggests, everything is soaking wet. It'd be very easy to ruin a whole, camera package in a wetland. So, but the canoe allowed me a platform to kind of work from. I quickly realized I had to make sure I tied everything down in the canoe. For example, I had to have a tripod and my camera set up on the tripod in the canoe. I never had a catastrophic accident, but there was a few times when it was very close for my camera tipping into the water. So making sure to literally tie the tripod with rope to the canoe. Yeah. But also even in the canoe, a wetland is just, it changes throughout the season. as far as the vegetation, as far as beaver dams are built in all these these side streams, and those were, of course, the streams that I was trying to navigate. And so you would have, I'd have to portage or like haul the canoe over all these beaver dams, and the vegetation would get very thick at times throughout the season. So it could take, 2 hours to go a mile in the canoe. Like it's just so much work.
Yeah.
And then there are also a lot of locations that I had to travel to on foot,
Yeah.
and, hauling all of my camera equipment. And on foot, a wetland is a lot more treacherous to navigate,
Yeah.
because there are areas where vegetation, has grown up, and there's like a solid root mass, so you can step on that, and then you step 3 feet farther forward, and your foot will fall down into like a hole that could just extend down who knows how far.
Yeah.
And there are also, you have to be careful, because there are areas in the wetland that you literally could fall down through. Like there are areas that look solid, but essentially it's like a small lake or a small pond, and it's just water underneath you, and you wouldn't know by the surface.
Yeah, in the film we can like see you walking, you filming yourself, and I think then there is also your grandpa's interview at around the same time where he's saying how dangerous it is, and we're seeing you walk there, and I'm like, okay, hopefully he doesn't step on something wrong there.
And my grandpa didn't tell me how dangerous it was until like months after filming.
Oh God. Why? He didn't think you would walk there?
I think that's just his method of teaching, actually. He really, well, not in like, he told me the very dangerous areas.
Okay.
That he didn't want me to explore.
Yeah.
But he didn't tell me, like how deep the marsh was, or that there are, these holes that you can fall through. But, I think he told me enough where I could stay somewhat safe.
Yeah.
But his method of teaching is just, you need to go out and experience it yourself.
Yeah.
The wetland is honestly, in the daytime, there's almost no insects, because
really?
The dragonflies are insects, but there's no there's no mosquitoes or biting insects, because dragonflies eat mosquitoes, all the birds eat mosquitoes. So in the daytime, it's a nice place to be in.
Yeah.
But then in the evening, it's a totally different story. And there's a few times when I went out to film under a full moon, and I think light also attracts mosquitoes. I could be totally wrong on that, because I think it's based on the carbon dioxide you breathe. Like they are attracted to that, and maybe warmth as well. But my camera monitor just attracted like hundreds of mosquitoes. Yeah. And I was trying to like change settings, and I would be smearing mosquitoes across the screen. Ew. And it is absolutely insane. I've never experienced anything like that before. Like literally thousands of mosquitoes all around you, and nice. I was wearing a full like boots, like rubber boots with my and rain pants with them tucked in, and a full like net over my face, and all the protective gear you could imagine.
Did it help?
I was bit. It helped. No, it did. It definitely helped. Yeah. But it was, I still got maybe 100 mosquito bites.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's what's interesting about wetlands is just how much they change, throughout the day, throughout the season. In the fall, there's no mosquitoes. So, and that makes it more interesting to film and challenging in a way too, to capture that environment. Yeah.
Well, now we already talked a little bit about wetlands, so why don't we watch the trailer and then talk a little bit more about it?
I'm Cal DeWitt, and I live here on Waubesa Wetlands. And over many years, I've worked with my neighbors to develop it into a preserve, which is now well over 1,000 acres. I can't stand somebody who doesn't understand the beauty of this place. And so I'm always working to unfold the beauty. And it's hard to do that because most of it happens very slowly, but sometimes very dramatically. In time, as you live in a place like this, you get a tremendously deep sense of awe and wonder because you can come eventually to think of it historically. This really is a history book written in the landscape by the landscape itself. So first it's green and wet, but then it's deep and mysterious. And in the end, it's all very wonderful.
Really cool trailer. What was that underwater in the sand?
Oh, the little bug that
Oh, was it a bug?
comes out. I honestly don't know, but it was, I think, like a little insect or like water beetle that popped
really
out.
nice.
And that was the spring area of the wetland, one of the spring areas. I know, that's a funny shot.
I think all of the shots are
Thank you.
really nice. So the watching BBC did definitely help. It seems you did really great compositioning and great filming, and of course audio practice. What would your tips be for filming in environments like this?
I mean, definitely this is a very simple tip, but bring the right equipment to dry your camera if it gets wet, to dry your lenses. I had a lot of like ND filters actually would fog up because it's such a moist and humid environment. So make sure you have, the cleaning supplies to, if you have an ND filter that fogs up, to be able to wipe that moisture off. I would also make sure I would have like towels and, like towels handy to be able to dry my equipment if it gets wet.
How did Blackmagic hold up in this environment?
Oh, yeah. So I filmed this on the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, which is not a waterproof camera. It's not weather resistant at all. So I had to be even extra careful due to that.
Yeah.
And there were a few situations where, like one time it rained very lightly and I had water and moisture soak into some of the top buttons on the camera. And it was just, a small amount of water, but they stuck down, and they were stuck down for the next at least a week. So you definitely, I would, if you're shooting in an environment like this, try to have a weather sealed camera, something that's designed to be shooting in that environment. But of course, use what you have at hand. You can make it work. I already kind of spoke to this a little bit earlier, but if you're coming into this similar to me, where you don't specialize in that ecosystem, or maybe you don't have a super strong scientific background, And even for people who maybe do have that specialty or background, I think this still applies in some ways. But when you first see this ecosystem or you first walk through it, you have to understand that like what you initially see is only the very, very surface of this place. And it takes so much time to actually learn and understand how this environment works. And I think in some ways you do just need to go out and just start exploring it and start filming it and seeing, you know, what kind of what surfaces, you know, and it's going to, and I would say more often than not, what you end up finding and capturing is probably going to be way different than what you were initially hoping to or expecting to. And I think that's totally okay. And that's normal. I think that's just, you know, this environment is, these ecosystems are very complicated and there's so many different components. And it's, from my experience at least, it's super challenging to try to predict, you know, what's happening or, you know, trying to focus on this one very specific thing, because at least in my case, something else will happen and you're going to follow that. Of course, then, you know, with these bigger, like with Planet Earth shows and bigger blue chip wildlife pieces, they have scientists specializing in, you know, maybe one specific species, so they know exactly where it is, exactly what time. And in that case, that's kind of a shortcut, you know, to being able to capture what you intend to capture. But so that's one tip, is just like have patience and just spend the time out there, and it takes a lot of time. And going off of that, kind of similar, I would say these ecosystems, I mean, specifically a wetland, but I'm sure this applies to lots of ecosystems. They're kind of this like, it's this like interconnected, like we think of it as, you know, one ecosystem, but in reality, there's all of these separate components, and it's almost like this like mosaic in a way of like all these sub habitats that make the whole ecosystem. And from what I found with this film is those are actually, you know, those like smaller components within the bigger system are what make it so interesting. And each of these have their own like unique characteristics, their own plant life and wildlife, and each have their own stories there. So I think like, yeah, there's just like, there's so much there that you could, so many stories there. I mean, even in Waubesa Wetlands, like I still feel like I just captured the surface of this place. Like there's, you know, I spent like one day filming in this spring area, and I found all these like microorganisms living in the spring that you would have no idea they were there. And it was just by accident. And there could be a whole film done on that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And even like listening to my grandpa, and, you know, he talks about this in some of his interviews, but like he's lived on the wetland for, you know, most of his life, and he still feels like there's so much more he does. Like every day he learns something new from it, and there's so much, the more he learns, the more he feels like there is yet to learn, I guess. Like it just is this continual, it doesn't really stop. Like there's so much we can take and learn from, not take, but so much we can learn from these environments if we're just patient and allow them to kind of, you know, show us what's genuinely there, instead of going in with our own human ideas, expectations.
Talking about also you using what you have, I remember you showed me your setup for the underwater shots, and I think that was quite cool and quite innovative of you. I have a photo here. Can you tell us a bit more about how you created the underwater videos?
I first want to say this was not my idea. I don't know where. I think I found this on YouTube or something. Some other cinematographer was using a fish tank to shoot underwater, and I was like, that's an incredible idea. you have a great underwater setup for, $20. And I modified mine slightly. As you can see, there's the flotation devices on either side, so which helped stabilize it, and also, so you wouldn't have to worry about the whole thing flipping over and dropping your camera into underwater. But yeah, this solved a big issue, which was I really wanted to capture this whole other side of the wetland, which is, under the surface. I think that's, that's like half of this ecosystem is underwater in some ways. So what's really nice about the wetland is most of the streams I was filming in were only a few feet deep. Mm-hmm. So with a fish tank, I could actually capture most of what was happening.
That's cool.
This setup allowed me, I could only submerge the camera maybe 10 inches under the water, but that allowed me to capture everything, for the most part, everything I was hoping to. And I could, I got shots of the springs like bubbling up with this setup, and some underwater insects and life and vegetation. So it worked much better than I thought it would. And it also allows you to like shoot with a high-end camera, my Blackmagic, with a good lens, and you can get, most underwater shots that you see are very like wide angle perspective, but this allowed me to shoot with whatever lens I wanted to. So I think it gave me it worked very well, and it gave me it solved that issue, and allowed me to capture that underwater world. And on top of that, I also used a GoPro and attached I think my brother actually was helping me for this, but we taped the GoPro onto a long PVC pipe, and then that allowed us to film there is this one area, it's called Deep Spring, but the water goes down maybe 15-20 feet. So it allowed us to get footage in those deeper water environments as well. But yeah, that was basically the whole setup. I never had to, actually submerge myself into the water. I think that'd be really fun, but also I think specifically in a wetland, it would you would really disturb the environment. So this allowed me to mostly work from the canoe, the fish tank allowed me to be in the canoe and also be filming underwater with, having the fish tank just on the edge of the canoe. Same with the GoPro. So it was a very kind of non-intrusive way to capture under the surface.
Nice. And the lens, did you have to go all the way to the front of the tank in order to focus? Yeah.
Great question. Yeah. So I tried a few different things, and what worked best with focus and clarity was to have the lens totally flush with that front glass of the fish tank. If it was a little bit back, you would capture, it'd just be a little bit blurry and focus would be a little bit off. So definitely if you are trying this yourself, have the lens all the way to the front, and also you probably will need a monitor. You can see in my setup, I had a monitor on top of the camera, so I could, if you don't have a monitor, it's going to be really hard to see what you're actually capturing.
Yeah,
so,
maybe
and
with
I'm
a
sure
flip screen.
Yeah, and also a different way I use this setup, I wanted to also capture the wetland in the rain one day. So I used the same setup and put a garbage bag, a trash bag over top of everything. And then I had basically a completely water sealed camera setup, and I was able to film, water droplets hitting the streams from underneath, which I thought was really interesting. So there's a lot of possibilities with a very simple DIY. This only costs $20 to make.
Nice. Did you tie the monitor onto the glass there as well, or there's a bow on top of the monitor?
I think the rope there is tying the flotation devices onto the fish tank.
Okay.
Yeah.
It looks like it's you tied the monitor into something as well. I also have you, or the camera in the canoe here.
Oh, yeah.
Did you really have it that high in the canoe? I would be really scared that
I
it
did
falls.
have it that high. I think
Wow.
that was the shortest my tripod could go, and the canoe is too narrow to like extend the legs out farther. So that's why you can, if you zoom in closely, I think you can see I tied in at least 2 or 3 of the legs to the canoe.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, it's scary when you're going over a beaver dam, or even when you're putting the canoe, dragging the canoe into the stream. Like, you have to be very careful, because it makes it more top heavy, and there's definitely a risk of the whole camera falling over. But somehow I didn't. My camera survived.
You figured out how to do it.
I figured out how to do it, and you can also see, if we want to just talk about this a little more, that blue rectangle square flotation device that you can see in the photo. Yeah, that. What's nice about a canoe is a canoe can actually act in a way as like a camera slider or a dolly. And what I would do is, especially there was a few days where my brother again came to help me, and he could orientate the canoe and push us forward slightly, and then I would have my camera actually sitting on top of that blue flotation device, and the water is very smooth, and it would just act as basically I could get very smooth like moving shots right on the water level to capture frogs and vegetation, all these things. So yeah, another like very cheap DIY kind of method of capturing this place.
That's a great tip there too.
Be careful. That one is a little bit more dangerous because your camera is close to the water, but it works.
And is this your brother?
That is my brother, Kalen. Yes. So my brother did most of the aerial work on the film. He actually came to help in September 2020, and that was at the time, like I knew at that point I was going to be a character in the film. So he captured footage of me walking through the wetland and also me canoeing, which is, as you'll see in the film, was used quite a lot. And yeah, it was very just so incredible to have. And he's a very experienced drone pilot, so to have his expertise and skill there, and just to have another person helping was invaluable for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, the drone shots are really beautiful as well.
Yeah.
Here we also see how high the grass is around you.
These are honestly shorter cattails. They can get up to, I would say, 9 feet above you. So they can be not 9 feet above you, but 9 feet tall. So it's really impressive. It doesn't look like much when you are on the outside of a wetland ecosystem, but when you're actually walking through it, everything is much bigger than it actually seems.
Are they sharp as well, like on the edges?
Not like dangerously sharp.
Okay.
But they are a little bit sharp, and yeah, very, like, the ends are very pointy.
Okay. And here we have you with your granddad filming.
Yeah.
That was one of the last shots as well in the film, right?
It was, yeah.
And someone else must have filmed it. I see a paddle here.
Yeah, so my family, if you can't tell, has been somewhat involved in this film.
Yeah, that's great.
I had my uncle actually come out, and he has some camera experience. So he came out for a day to film my grandpa and I canoeing through the wetland, which I don't want to give away too much because that's as you said, near the end of the film.
Right.
But that was also like, just you have to use the resources you have available to you. So use your family, use people who are interested just find people interested in the project and that you're working on. And, from my experience, if they see that you're passionate about it, they want to help you. So you can make it work. You can make it happen.
That's great. And what did you think were the most challenging shots to get?
I think underwater was definitely challenging to film. There was one sequence where I was trying to film, basically the sequence captures the hydrology of the wetlands, how the water kind of moves through the wetlands. And I was trying to capture this spring area. And this is where also, as we just were talking about, I used the fish tank method because the water was only about 1.5 feet deep.
Yeah.
And I was trying to get these springs. This is one of the only areas in the marsh where you can actually physically see the springs like bubbling up. And it was very challenging to capture because there was some wind, so the canoe was drifting. So it was impossible to stay in one position. And also the bottom of this area is, the water and the bottom of this spring area is very, there's like, basically the water and sediments are very mixed. So in my example, if you move the fish tank at all underwater, it stirs up all of these sediments that completely ruin the shot. So I probably spent a good, 5-6 hours trying to just capture just one or two shots of this spring bubbling up through the sediment. And I was able to get it. And also it was very murky water. So, because there's all these sediments, so it was almost impossible to see what I was filming until like you go in later and color grade it. So it was kind of a gamble where to point the camera, where to, focus. But luckily I ended up getting a few of those key shots to kind of tell that whole story of the water cycle in the wetland.
Yeah, it did capture it really beautifully there as well. And you filmed over the duration of a couple of years, or the production was a couple of years. How much did you actually film on location? How much time did you spend there?
I spent on location 3 months consistently filming in the marsh, going out most days. And I actually was sleeping at my grandparents' house. So it was during COVID though, so I couldn't sleep in, they had a room available, but I couldn't actually sleep in their house because we were of course worried about COVID, and they're elderly. So I ended up sleeping in my car for a few of those weeks. And then also I eventually upgraded to a tent in my grandparents' backyard. But I was just kind of like all in, just wanting to spend as much time as possible and just immerse myself in this place. And I think, that's what it took to be able to capture some of the more interesting characteristics of the wetland, more interesting wildlife. But even that, as I said, I feel like I was just kind of touching the surface. But so 3 months consistently filming, and then another 3 months or so where I was, maybe like half of the week, like it was 4 days a week filming. But so a good, basically early summer through fall. And I also filmed a year later as well, so in 2021, to get some additional footage of my grandfather and I. That's the behind the scene photo of us in the canoe. But that was a whole year after most of the production. And my goal was to film this all in one summer, and being naive and just working on my first long documentary, I thought I could edit the whole film in 3 months and have it ready, pitch it to PBS that next, like that winter. But of course it's, making a feature length documentary. I think I don't know what the standard is for feature length. I've heard a lot of different things, but it's 60 minutes long, so I guess I'll call it a feature-length film. But there's just, which we can talk about later, there's just so many things that go into it. And, you know, my plan of finishing it within a few months and, you know, trying to pitch it to PBS, all of that, that's actually where I'm at now, which is 4 years later. So.
But I think it's good to sometimes take a long time to work on a project. I feel like I always wanted to put everything out really quickly, so I have something on my portfolio, and I wish on my first projects that I would have taken more time and actually sit longer in the pre-production, or then also like you did, find people to work with, like a sound designer. I think not every project needs a long time, but some projects do, and it's good when you can take the time and put your energy and motivation and work into it, and then have something great at the end.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's hard to, I think when you're in the project, like you want, you know, you want to, like, you have all the footage captured, so you're kind of racing to just like get the edit put together and to finally, you know, also just to move on to the next thing. But I think with personal films like this, it's, you do have the capability, you know, you can take the time to do it. And I think it's also, you just need to learn how to enjoy the whole, like the process of making a film of this scale, because I don't know if you want to talk about this now, but there's, again, so many things that go into it. And if you know, are just racing to get it to the finish line, you're going to get really burnt out. It's not going to be a super, you know, I don't think the final film will be very good, and you probably like want to change career paths, because it's just, it's a slow, I really think, you have to take your time with these kind of things.
Yeah. On the film's website, you make aware of the issues that wetlands are destroyed really rapidly. Was it the goal to make aware of the biodiversity and importance of the wetlands?
I think my approach with this film was to make something that focused on the positive, that focused on what we still have. In Wisconsin, you know, a lot of our natural spaces are gone. They've been converted, and, you know, they're now subdivisions or agriculture. And I think people are aware of that. People are aware that that's, you know, an issue. And I kind of wanted to make a story that highlighted this place that is relatively undeveloped by people and still has, like, you know, is very biodiverse, has all of this life. And I think in my mind, you know, it depends on the project you're trying to make, but that by focusing on just what still remains, what we have, and this more positive story, I think that's how you can build people's appreciation for our natural worlds and make people really cherish the places we still have left, and then want to protect those places, instead of just more of, you know, I think there definitely is a place for telling people about the issues, because of course we have a ton of issues we need to address. But I think people want inspiring stories that make them realize, like, oh, there's still these amazing places, and it's not, you know, far off in this other country. It's like right here, like right in my backyard. And it's, you know, we need to protect these places. So that was kind of my intention, I guess. But in, you know, that was my method of showcasing the biodiversity and the importance of a wetland, was instead of just saying there's all these issues, actually just genuinely trying to portray this place, and hopefully people will fall in love with it after they learn about it.
Yeah, I definitely think they will. It was really interesting to me too. I didn't know much about wetlands, but learning through your film was a great way to get to know more about it. And you partnered with a local environmental organization to make a tangible impact and connect with the audience. What have you done already, and what is still planned? I know you have an event planned in autumn.
Yeah, great question. The partnerships with the organizations didn't come until maybe a year after starting the project, maybe even, a year and a half or so. And I think, first off, if you're working on a project like this, definitely you should try to do some research, find organizations who are involved in, the ecosystem you're working in and the story you're working in, because that is just an amazing way to just, find people also passionate about this thing and who want to support you. And they're going to help you really, as you were saying, like make the biggest impact with your work and help get it out to the public. So I reached out to this organization called the Natural Resources Foundation of Wisconsin, and they prioritize Waubesa Wetlands. It's like one of they work in conservation of a lot of our state's natural spaces, but they have like these priority sites where they have field trips going there, and they have conservation work happening there. And Waubesa Wetlands was one of those sites that they focus on. So already they had that connection. They also knew my grandfather, and that was kind of just a way to start that conversation. And they ended up supporting the film with a grant, which was extremely helpful for the production. And I think more beneficial, though, was just their, support of just having conversations with them, collaborating with them, sharing ideas. And they have been really invested in trying to use the film as kind of a way to get people outside more, to get people more passionate about our state's natural spaces. And they helped with promotion of the film, like sharing it. They did a blog on it and sharing it on their like social media. So again, connecting with these organizations, like, I think is the best way of, there's only so much you can do as an individual filmmaker. So these organizations will help you actually get your story to the audience that needs to hear about it. It's exciting to have this event that extends beyond, just the film itself, and is also, giving people this opportunity to get more involved with, these organizations in our state that are doing really good work, and to get outside. And hopefully it's just, an inspiring event to people. And I think it's also really important what's exciting about this screening is it's in Madison, Wisconsin, which is only 20 minutes away from the wetland area. We'll actually have one of the screenings on like the northern shore of Lake Waubesa, so right there, and just giving people the opportunity to see what is here, right around them, what's in, I've said this before, but like what's in their backyard. And I think that is a really good, I think, and we're still in the process, but I think that's how you can make an impact with your work, is by showing the people. Lots of these people might not even know that all this stuff exists, right here.
As this is your first feature film, I'm sure you learned a lot creating it. What are your tips on creating a low-budget independent film, and what would you do different with your next project?
Yeah, I think I learned so much from making this film. I I was very, as I said, very naive going into it. I had never worked on a long form documentary like this, and I had no idea what would be involved. I think one of the biggest things I learned making this film is that, it's not just shooting and editing. There's so many other things that are involved in making a long documentary or feature-length documentary like this. You have to also be, in my case, I have narration in my film. You have to be a writer. You have to be, at the end of my film, since I included myself, like a presenter in some ways. You have to be, a project manager and organizer. You have to staying organized is very, very challenging on a film of this scale. A producer, a grant writer, I'm trying to, there's more like the promotional side of things, the marketing, trying to actually get your film out to the public is a whole another side of it.
Yeah.
So I think you have to be aware that, maybe your passions are just cinematography or just editing, but if you're undertaking an independent film like this, you're going to be wearing all the hats. You're going to be doing all these different things, which is a ton of work. But the benefit, I think, is it teaches you kind of everything that goes into making a film. And then it allows you from there to kind of really understand what your strengths are, what you want to focus on as your career. So I think that definitely is the benefit. And there's a reason why filmmaking is a collaborative field or industry. There's a reason why on big Hollywood movies, there's 200 people working on them. There's only so much one person can do. And that was another thing I learned is making sure that if you want to embark on something like this, you still need to have the support of other people. And I haven't really talked about the other people involved in this project, but there were, I had one friend who was acting as a producer in some ways. They were helping, they would join some of the meetings I had. They were really, really helpful with providing feedback on the edits and providing just an overall, feedback on the story and flow and structure. And that is invaluable in so many ways. And just having that person you can call, after going through an edit and just saying I need advice on this. So we say this is an independent film, but there's lots of people involved. And also my family was super involved. My sister did a lot of research. She has a scientific background. She does a lot of environmental work. So tons of research. And she was, really helpful with researching certain topics. And I don't know, there's more people involved, but then also the one other thing is that, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, but making a film like this is really a journey that you need to be patient with. You need to just take one step at a time. And I think more exciting than finishing the film itself is taking, those steps of making the film and the process involved and the really interesting people that you hopefully meet through that process. And for me, I got involved with the Jackson Wild community. Because I think actually going back to those emails, they mentioned, you have to get involved with these bigger networking events and, specifically Jackson Wild. So I looked into Jackson Wild and I attended virtually for their festival in 2021, I believe. And that was the first time I ever, attended a Jackson Wild event. It was virtual, but it allowed me to meet people who are also working in this industry and doing interesting stuff. And I could share a little bit about my film. And that was, just having like people who understand what you're doing, because none of my friends here in Wisconsin have any idea why I'm making this film or what's involved. No idea. So you need to find those people who have the understanding, who share that passion and drive that you do, and like who care about these topics, because it can get really lonely if you don't have that. So definitely go to Jackson Wild, go to like the bigger events, network with people, like find those people who you can talk about. And, even like I asked you to provide feedback for my film, and we met through Jackson Wild.
Yeah.
So that's extremely important. And I don't think I would have finished this film if I didn't have that, the support of a lot of different people who are helping us, in different ways. So that's huge.
Yeah. I think community is really important. Like sometimes you can feel stuck if you live somewhere, like you said, your friends didn't really know what your film is about or what you're doing. I think a lot of us, especially when we're starting off and don't really have people that do the same thing, we feel like, what are we doing? Why does no one understand us, or no one knows what we're doing? And through Jackson, I think it's definitely a great community. As Summit Fellows, I think we still have contact with a lot of people, me at least, I think you too, not with everyone, but with a lot of the people also here on the podcast. It's great to invite you all back and talk with you again. And not just to meet other filmmakers, but also the production companies, for example, or the workshops we had, for example, with National Geographic, and the events where you can meet different people. I think that's also really great. And to meet people you can collaborate with as well. And we also learned, for example, how to write the grants then, and that's also important to know, because if we make an independent film with our own money, then probably we can't afford many things, and we could maybe make a better film with more money. So getting a fund is quite hard, I would say. But to learn how to do it, it's important. And also learn what the distributors want. A TV channel wants something else than a streaming channel, for example.
Like when I first made that decision that I wanted to get into environmental and wildlife filmmaking, I had no idea like what the steps were to get there. And you just see like there's these people like you can find stuff online about these people who are established, who have made it, who seem, who are getting work, but there's not like, and I think with podcasts like this, not like this because I'm not an established filmmaker yet. I'm still working on that journey, but it is becoming more, it is becoming a lot more like accessible to learn how people have made it into this career. But when I was first looking into it, like there was nothing like I couldn't find like any resources really. And Jackson.
Yeah, same with me.
Yeah.
That's why I started this podcast.
But with Jackson Wild, it's like, anyone, at least when I did the virtual summit, when I attended the virtual summit, anyone can sign up, and then you just like, they had like the virtual campfires, right? And have you seen their campfire setup? It's like, it's just like this screen. No. And they have like these icons of campfires, and it shows the icons of also like the people who are at that like campfire. It's just like a little like Zoom, like a little video call room. So like you can like just like join any of these, and then you're immediately in like talking with people who maybe it's someone who's like head of PBS or Curiosity Stream, or like people who are really established in the industry, and you're nothing, but like. That's what Jackson Wild did to me, was it just like opened that door of, it didn't land, it hasn't led to like work yet, but it just opened the door to show me actually like this is obtainable. There's all these people working in this field. Everyone that I've met at least is extremely open, and we all care about these issues and our planet. So we want to help each other, which is really different from the traditional film industry. And I think that's why I love this community so much. But so that's like what I love. I think that's what Jackson Wild has kind of done for me. But for the fellowship, which the Jackson Wild Fellowship Program was, or what was it, Summit Fellowship Program? That was like a program that we applied for, 2021, I think we applied, and then, or 2022.
2022. And in in September it was, I think in summer we got the,
But that was a program that Jackson Wild was offering at the time that was helping filmmakers who had a project in development, who were like still kind of early career or mid-career, who were working on a project and needed, support and needed mentorship. And so they provided, we each got like an individual mentor in the Jackson Wild community, and workshops with National Geographic on impact storytelling, and Curiosity Stream, and Smithsonian, right, on grant writer pitching your projects and getting funding. So, and also just like the opportunity to meet, people like you and like our fellowship cohort, and like just it really, really like just to me it was really inspiring, because I just saw how people were actually, I saw both first like how amazing everyone is in this community. And then also it allows you access to just learn about how people got to where they are, and that it takes, a huge takeaway for me is like, it takes time. I don't need to like rush my career. Like there's people who are, like shooting for the BBC now, but like they didn't start until they were, like much older than me. So like they didn't even start filmmaking until much older than me. So it's I don't know. I think you don't put too much pressure on yourself to rush things. Just like really try to enjoy it and connect with the right people. And you have to love it,
Yeah. The cool thing at Jackson Wild is that you also eat together and everything. When I was looking for a space at lunch, I actually sat down to someone from our national TV channel, and I got talking with her, and through her I got then a freelance job as a director for a science show for our TV channel. So that's nice. And I didn't expect anything else but eat my lunch, but something great came out of it.
That's amazing. Yeah, I feel like that stuff happens all the time at Jackson Wild.
At the end, I always like to ask what advice you would give someone who wants to start a career in this field.
Specifically for camera, I think it's,
like wildlife camera.
I think it's just really important to, this is obvious, but you just have to start working on stuff, and you have to start shooting as much as you can. Mm-hmm. The hard part is that you have to make a career out of this. You have to make a living doing this. And I think that's something not many people talk about, but I'm fully like open to talking about like how I've made that happen, because I'm currently freelance. And I think you kind of need to have, I was just talking to another cinematographer who mentioned this to me, but you kind of should try to have like 2 columns of work, or you can have 2 columns of work. Hopefully, eventually you get to a point where you just do the projects that you love doing. But for me, there's like the work that pays, that you get paid well to do, and that work, or then that helps support the other column, which is the work that you're really passionate about doing and that you actually want to do, for your career eventually. So I shoot lots of different things throughout the entire process of making this film, I shot weddings. I second shot weddings. So I just basically was there. I just have to show up with my camera, and it's one day of filming. Not at all what I'm passionate about, but I will say, I know.
Don't tell that to your couples.
Maybe take that out. No, it's okay. They won't watch this.
Maybe they're interested in wildlife filmmaking.
Weddings, though, are actually great because it still is, you use lots of the same skills in wedding videography as you do in documentary filmmaking. And it also teaches you how to work with clients and how to work under pressure in like a really pretty fast-paced environment. So, you can do all these separate jobs that are like not totally what you're passionate about, but you still build skills through them, and then they can help fund what you actually want to do. And if I hadn't filmed weddings, while working on this documentary, I would have had to get like a full-time job doing, I don't know what, or at least, it would have taken a lot of time away from the project.
Yeah.
But as a cinematographer, you can like find, these higher paying jobs like weddings or like commercials, hopefully it aligns with your values still. And then like that frees up a lot of your time to do other work that you actually want to do. So that would be my advice for like making this sustainable as a career. I hope to eventually be working full time on documentaries or shows that I really care about. But as we've been talking about, it takes a long time to build those connections. And that is also the biggest thing with being a cinematographer, is the connections you have and understanding that these connections take a long time to build. And I think like, most, like you're not going to meet someone. I think it's rare to meet someone or meet a company and they give you a job right away. But more so like meet someone, reach out to them again, following up, and then every few months, like check in and be like, hey, I'm still working. Like, let me know if you need any help. And it will lead to stuff. Yeah. It just takes a long time, but the more you can build these connections, the more, like successful you'll be in the long term. But just, you have to be patient with it.
Sadly, in this industry, it's really hard to get good paying jobs. I think sometimes you have something and then there is a long period where there is nothing, because there are only so many films from big productions that pay you well, and there are also so many people that want to be on it. So I think that shouldn't be so discouraging if you're trying out and you don't get a job right away, or if you're already working a while and then a while you don't have a job. You kind of have to think about that when you start and be prepared to also take different jobs in between. Sadly, that is the reality, that only very little people, I feel like, can have this as a full-time job and not do anything else on the side and just make a living off of this industry, especially as camera operators. I feel like as in the offices it's easier, but out shooting it's sometimes harder, as also to
definitely
when you're starting
even
out.
The people who are working on the biggest productions, biggest shows, I can almost guarantee you don't have work 12 months out of the year. Like they have a few really really good jobs for a few months, so then they probably have a break, and I would assume need to also pick up other work that they maybe aren't as passionate about. But you don't need to think of it as a negative thing, because you can still be building your skill sets doing these other jobs, for sure. And
doing your own projects also in between. Great. Then thank you for being in the podcast. It was really interesting to get a bit more of a behind the scenes of your feature film and also hear your advice. And I hope I have you in the podcast soon again with a different project.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.